3 minutes into the gala. The massive screen unexpectedly showed my face. My father was right there in the front row, the same man who had once raised a glass and said he wished I'd never been born. He didn't know the microphone on his table was live, and I didn't know that night would trigger a domino effect, shaking his entire empire and forcing me to choose between a late apology and complete freedom. My name is Ainsley Mercer. I am 31 years old. By Whittaker standards, this fact alone is a mild embarrassment. My father, Graham Whittaker, was a CEO by 30. My brother, Cole, was a vice president by 28. They move in a world of polished glass, 9-figure deals, and the kind of quiet power that reshapes skylines. They are Harbor and Pine Holdings, a name synonymous with luxury real estate and hotels that cost more per night than my monthly rent. I live in Milton Flats, a working-class neighborhood in Minneapolis where the buildings are brick and the fire escapes are functional, not decorative. My apartment is a one-bedroom on the 4th floor. It is clean, it is organized, and it is paid for by my salary as a public school science teacher. My other life, the one that truly matters, happens in the evenings and on weekends. It happens in a converted storage room in the school's basement, a space I secured through 2 years of grant writing and relentless petitioning. It's called the North Star Labs, though no official sign hangs on the door. It is my secret, not because I hide it, but because my family has never thought to ask. The Whittakers do not ask questions. They issue statements, and I, by virtue of my profession and my postcode, am not considered a source of valuable statements. Cole, in particular, has always viewed me as a convenient, unpaid subcontractor. For a decade, I have been the anonymous ghostwriter behind his, and by extension, my father's, most heartfelt public addresses, the annual charity ball speech, the remarks for the Chamber of Commerce, the glowing editorial on corporate responsibility. I write them, and they read them, and the circle of willful ignorance continues. Last Tuesday, the night before my birthday, I drove my 10-year-old Civic to the family estate in Edina for the obligatory weekly dinner. The house smells like lemon oil and old money. We were gathered in the main dining room, a cavernous space with a table that could seat 20, though it was just the 4 of us. The topic, as always, was business. The North Loop residences are fully funded, Graham announced, cutting into a piece of veal I knew cost more than my weekly groceries. His voice has a boardroom texture, smooth and final. The zoning commission folded. They didn't fold, Dad, Cole said, with the easy confidence of the heir apparent. We simply provided them with a more compelling economic forecast. He smirked, taking a sip of wine. Theirs was sentimental. And the mixed-use component? My mother, Lydia, asked. Her voice was the only one that ever wavered, but she masked it with a brittle, flawless politeness. She was checking the facts, performing her role as the supportive, informed spouse. Retail and dining on the ground floor, Cole said. High end, of course. We're curating the tenancy list now. They talked like this for 20 minutes. They discussed profit margins, concrete suppliers, and the political capital gained from the deal. I sat there, a ghost at the feast, pushing a single asparagus spear around my plate. They didn't mean to exclude me. To actively exclude someone, you must first acknowledge their presence. I was simply an irrelevant variable, a piece of furniture that happened to breathe. I finally cleared my throat. The sound was overly loud in the heavy silence that followed Cole's point. 3 pairs of eyes turned to me, blinking, as if surprised I could make a noise. Speaking of community engagement, I said, my voice feeling rusty. The STEM program I volunteer with at school. We just got our first robotics kit funded. The kids are building a functional prototype for the city's water quality challenge. I felt a small, stupid spark of pride. I wanted, just once, for them to see this part of me. Cole didn't even let me finish. He laughed, a short, sharp bark that wasn't unkind, merely dismissive. He turned back to Graham. Anyway, the demographic we're targeting for North Loop won't be interested in school science fairs. He waved a hand, erasing me. These are not our clientele. Ainsley. Not our demographic, not our clientele. I looked at my mother. She was intently studying the crystal pattern on her water glass, her face a perfect, neutral mask. Her silence was her shield, and her weapon. It kept the peace. It also left me completely, utterly alone. I was used to being faded at these dinners, blurred at the edges until I matched the wallpaper, but that night felt different. The casualness of Cole's dismissal, the finality of it, settled on me like dust. I realized it wasn't a recent development. I hadn't been a part of this family, in any meaningful way, for a very long time. I was just a historical artifact they kept on a shelf. I drove home under a cold, clear sky, the silence in my car a welcome relief. The call came at 11:30 p.m. I was already in bed, reading a journal on particle physics. My phone buzzed on the nightstand, illuminating Cole's name. I let it ring 3 times before answering, a small, petty power play. "Ains," he said. No hello, no happy early birthday, just that clipped, efficient nickname. "You awake? Good. I've got a situation." My situation, I thought, is that I need to be up in 6 hours. "What is it, Cole?" "I need a speech, Dad's keynote for the Astoria Trust Gala. It's in 3 days. 3 days, not a request, but a deadline." "The charity gala? I thought you had the PR team for that." "The PR team is soulless," he said, a line I'm fairly sure I wrote for him 2 years ago. "This needs to be personal, about legacy, community, you know the drill, 2,000 words, tight, focus on education as the great equalizer, that sort of thing." I stared at the cracked paint on my ceiling. Education as the great equalizer. The irony was thick enough to choke on. The man who funded charter schools as tax shelters, and whose son just dismissed my public school program as irrelevant, wanted to sound like a champion of the people. "Cole, I'm really busy this week." I know. You're a lifesaver. Ains, just email it to me by Friday morning, top notch. Like you always do." He was already hanging up. "Thanks. You're the best." The line clicked dead. I sat in the dark for a full minute. I should have said no. I should have told him where he could file his situation, but I hadn't. The old habit, the deep, insidious programming of the good daughter, was too strong. That pathetic, flickering hope that if I just wrote the words perfectly this time, if the speech was brilliant enough, he might actually see me. He might say my name. So I did what I always do. I got up, walked to the small desk in the corner of my living room, and opened my laptop. I stared at the blank document. I typed the first line, "Education is the foundation of a strong community." I stopped, my fingers hovering over the keys. I knew, with absolute, bone-deep certainty, that my father did not believe that. He believed capital was the foundation. He believed exclusivity was the foundation. The words I was writing were a lie, a beautiful, polished suit of armor for him to wear in public. I was tired. I was so profoundly tired. I leaned back, rubbing my eyes. My gaze drifted to my email inbox, which I'd left open. I saw my personal filing system on the side, and I saw the one folder I checked every day, the one that held the only thing that felt real. FF Private. Field Forward. There was an unread message from 2 days ago. I had been so busy with grading and the dinner that I hadn't opened it. The subject line was, Astoria Trust Humanitarian Award. Finalist notification. I clicked it. My heart started a low, heavy drumbeat against my ribs. It was real. My application for the labs, the detailed budgets, the impact reports, the student testimonials I had cried over, had been accepted. I was one of 3 finalists for the Great Lakes Humanitarian Award. The gala. My eyes scanned the boilerplate congratulations and logistical details. Date, time, Riverside Convention Hall. And then I saw it. At the very bottom of the email, a line I had overlooked in my initial shock. "We are deeply grateful to our sponsors, whose generosity makes this event possible." The list was long. Banks, foundations, tech companies, And there, at the very top, under the highest category, Diamond Sponsors, Harbor and Pine Holdings. My father's company, my father, the keynote speaker, was a diamond sponsor of the very event where I was a finalist for the main award, and he had no idea. Cole had no idea. They were so insulated by their own self-importance, so convinced of my irrelevance, that it had never even occurred to them to connect the name Ainsley Mercer with anything other than free speechwriter and disappointing daughter. I closed the speech document. I closed my email. I stood up and walked to the window, looking down at the quiet, empty streets of Milton Flats. A cold, clear resolve settled over me. It was different from anger, which was hot and fast. This was heavy and permanent, like bedrock. I was done. I was done being the ghost. I was done writing their words for them. I was done hoping to be seen. This time, I would not beg for a seat at their table. This time, I would not forward them the email with a hopeful, pleading note. I would not ask Cole to get me a +1. I would simply show up. I wouldn't argue with them. I wouldn't confront them at another disastrous family dinner. There was no need. I would let the truth speak for itself. The speech for Cole remained unwritten. I had closed the file, and I had not opened it again. Friday morning came and went, marked only by 2 increasingly annoyed texts from him, which I ignored. My silence was a new, fragile thing, and it felt both terrifying and powerful. On Saturday, my actual birthday, my mother called. Her voice was light, almost breezy, a tone she used when navigating a social minefield. "Ainsley, darling, your father has had the most wonderful idea." I waited, holding my breath. A wonderful idea from Graham usually meant a strategic merger or a tax loophole. "He wants to take you out, tonight, for your birthday," she said, infusing her voice with a brightness that didn't reach her eyes. I was sure. "He's booked the Brass Finch, 8 o'clock. The Brass Finch. Not a quiet family dinner at home, not a casual meal at a place I might choose. The Brass Finch was Harbor and Pine's crown jewel, the flagship restaurant in their newest hotel, a place where a single entree cost what I budgeted for a week of groceries. It was a power move, a statement. "He booked it?" I asked, my voice flat. "Or did his assistant?" "Ainsley, please," Lydia sighed, the breeze dying down. "It's a lovely gesture. You know how he is. He's trying. He wants to celebrate you." "He wants to celebrate me." The words hung in the air, absurd and tempting. This was the lie I had been feeding myself for decades. That next time would be different, that this time they would see me, after the dismissal at the dinner, after Cole's entitled demand. Maybe this was it. Maybe the silence, my refusal to write the speech, had finally registered. Maybe this was the olive branch. I was 31 years old, and I still wanted my father to like me. The thought was humiliating. "Okay, Mom," I said, the words tasting like compromise. 8 o'clock. "Wonderful," she said, all business again. "Wear something appropriate." The call clicked. Appropriate. For the Brass Finch. Appropriate meant expensive. I looked in my closet. My wardrobe was built for a high school science lab and a drafty apartment. Corduroys, sweaters, one serviceable black dress. Against my better judgment, I went out. I went to a boutique I usually just walked past, and I bought a dress. It was a dark, midnight navy, silk, with a simple cut that was elegant and severe. It cost me an entire month's careful savings, a reckless, hopeful, stupid purchase. As I handed over my credit card, I felt a knot of dread. I was buying a costume for a play I didn't want to be in. I arrived at 7:55 p.m. The valet looked at my Civic with a flicker of polite disdain before taking the key. The lobby of the Brass Finch was an ocean of marble, brushed bronze, and low, atmospheric lighting. It was designed to make you feel small and rich and seen. I found the private dining room. It wasn't a family dinner. The room was full. There were at least 40 people, all in expensive suits and cocktail dresses. holding champagne flutes and talking in low, confident voices. I recognized some of them from the business pages. Bankers, city council members, real estate developers. This wasn't a birthday party. This was a networking event. I saw my father holding court by the massive fireplace, a glass of amber liquid in his hand. I saw Cole, already working the room, shaking hands with a man I knew was a major zoning commissioner. I saw my mother near the door, her smile pinned in place, her eyes scanning the crowd. She saw me, and the relief that washed over her face was palpable. The prop had arrived. "Ainsley, darling, happy birthday," she whispered, kissing the air near my cheek. She clutched my arm, her fingers tight. "Your father is so pleased you're here." He hadn't even looked up. For an hour, I was adrift. I was introduced to people as Graham's daughter, a title that immediately erased any other identity. The conversation was exclusively about property, interest rates, and the new North Loop project. I tried to find an anchor, something to say, but I was a foreigner here. A man with a florid face and a loud tie broke from a group and cornered me by the bar. "Don't think we've met," he boomed. "Vance Tierney, Tierney Construction. We do all of Harbor and Pine's foundation work." "Ainsley Mercer," I said, shaking his large, damp hand. "Mercer? Not a Whitaker, then?" He looked confused. "It's my mother's maiden name," I said. "Ah," he processed this. "So, Ainsley Mercer, what do you do? Marketing? Legal?" Before I could answer, Cole materialized at my elbow, a fresh drink in his hand. He clapped Vance on the back. "Vance, good to see you. Don't worry about this one." He gestured to me with his glass. "She's the family's charity case." It was meant as a joke. The men around them chuckled. Vance, however, was a literalist. He turned back to me, his smile fading. "Oh, what do you do?" "I'm a teacher," I said. Cole winced, a performative, theatrical wince for the audience. "A teacher," he repeated, drawing the word out. "Can you imagine? All that expensive education, and she decides to go for the teacher's salary." More laughter. This time, it was sharp. It was the laughter of men who measured the world in dollars and found my life's work to be a rounding error. Vance, seeing his cue, grinned. "Well, takes all kinds, I guess. At least the summers are good, right?" I felt the blood drain from my face. I looked at Cole, at his easy, privileged smirk. He had done it so casually, reduced my entire life to a punchline to impress a concrete contractor. "If you'll excuse me," I said. My voice was tight, but I walked away, not to the bar, not to the exit, but to my assigned seat at the main table. I would not give them the satisfaction of running. Dinner was served. The food was exquisite. Tiny portions of complex things I couldn't identify. I ate, or I moved the food around my plate. The conversation was a drone. My father and Cole were at the head of the table, flanked by the most important partners. I was seated between a silent spouse and an empty chair. Finally, after the dessert plates were cleared, my mother caught my father's eye and gave a small, significant nod. Graham stood up. The room quieted instantly. He tapped his glass with a spoon, a sound that cut through the air like a chisel. "Thank you all for coming," he said, his voice effortless, filling the room. He smiled, the warm, charismatic smile he saved for boardrooms and camera lenses. "It's always a pleasure to mix business with friendship, and tonight, we have a little something extra to celebrate." He looked down the table, not at me, but at me. "It is my daughter Ainsley's 31st birthday." A polite, scattered applause. I felt a hot flush of shame. I wanted to be invisible. "Now, many of you know my son, Cole," he gestured to Cole, who raised his glass, beaming. "Cole is a vital part of Harbor and Pine. He understands the business. He understands what it takes to build, to create, to win." The room murmured in agreement. This was a coronation for Cole. "Ainsley," Graham continued, his gaze finally landing on me, "is different." He paused. The room was utterly still. He was a showman. My father. He knew how to hold a pause. "She's a teacher," he said, and the word, in his mouth, sounded like an epithet. "She lives in a tiny apartment in a bad neighborhood. She spends her time on projects that don't make money, projects that don't build empires." I could feel Vance, at a nearby table, watching me. I could feel the collective weight of 40 pairs of eyes. I kept mine on my father. My new navy dress felt like a suit of armor, and it was failing. "I have given her every opportunity," he said. His voice wasn't angry, it was calm, matter of fact. This was the most chilling part. He was stating what he believed to be a simple, objective truth. The best schools, the best connections, a trust fund she refuses to touch, like some kind of petulant martyr. "Dad," Cole said, his voice low. Even he looked uncomfortable, but not for me, for the breach of social decorum. Graham ignored him. He looked directly at me. The warmth was gone from his eyes. There was only a cold, profound disappointment. "You are my greatest failure, Ainsley," he said, his voice clear and steady. 31 years old, and you have nothing to show for it. You have produced nothing. You have built nothing. You are, in every measurable way, a failure." The silence that followed was absolute. It was a vacuum. I could hear my own blood roaring in my ears. No one coughed. No one moved. And then he raised his glass. "But she is my blood," he said, as if this were the punchline. "So, happy birthday. I wish you'd never been born." A few people laughed. It was a terrible sound, high-pitched and nervous. Vance Tierney was one of them. My mother had her eyes squeezed shut, her hand gripping the tablecloth. Cole was staring at his plate, as if it held the secrets to the universe. I did not cry. I did not stand up and scream. I did not throw my wine in his face. I very calmly, very deliberately, picked up my unused water glass. I placed it on the linen tablecloth, next to my plate. The sound was a soft, definitive click. Then I stood up. I pushed my chair back in, the legs scraping faintly on the wood floor. I put my napkin on the table, and I walked out. I walked through the restaurant, past the tables of laughing diners. I walked through the opulent lobby. I did not run. I kept my back straight, my shoulders unhunched. I let the valet get my car, and I did not look at him as I took the key. I drove home, my hands steady on the wheel. There were no tears. There was only a vast, cold, empty space inside me where the hope used to be. The hope had finally been extinguished. I got back to my apartment at 10:30 p.m. I took off the expensive navy dress, this symbol of my foolish, lingering optimism, and threw it in a heap on the floor. I sat at my laptop, in my t-shirt and sweatpants. I opened my email. I looked at the message from the Astoria Trust. Finalist notification. I right-clicked on the email. I created a new folder. I typed the name, North Star Labs. It was the first time I had used the name outside of my private grant proposals. It was the name I had used to register my nonprofit corporation. Filed 6 months ago with a quiet, pro bono lawyer. It was my legal entity. It was real. It was mine. I moved the email into the folder. Then I opened my impact report, the one I had submitted with the application. I read the numbers again, letting them fill the cold, empty space inside me. 118 students, 92% showing measurable improvement in STEM competency scores after 1 semester, 13 summer scholarships secured at major universities. I opened the gala information packet. I scrolled past the dinner menu and the dress code. I found what I was looking for. Rehearsal schedule, Riverside Convention Hall, finalist walkthrough and tech check. Date, March 4th. Time, 2 p.m. At the bottom of the packet was a provisional seating chart for the VIP tables. Table 1, the best table in the house, Graham Whitaker, Harbor and Pine Holdings. Cole Whitaker, Harbor and Pine Holdings. I looked at their names, right there in black and white, at the center of the room where I was scheduled to be honored. I opened a new document, and I wrote a note, just for myself. They will have to listen. I woke up the next morning. Not with a hangover, but with a chilling, absolute clarity. The cold, empty space inside me from the night before had solidified. It was no longer a void. It was a foundation. I got out of bed, drank a glass of water, and went to my laptop. I logged into my bank. I looked at the number in my personal savings account, the one I'd been feeding with small, disciplined transfers since my first teaching paycheck. It was the in-case fund, in case the car died, in case of a medical emergency, in case I finally found the courage to build something. The total was $41,500. 13 years of scraped-together savings, of saying no to vacations I couldn't afford and dinners I didn't want. I transferred the entire amount to my checking account. By 10 a.m., I was at a bank branch, getting a cashier's check. By 11:30, I was in the leasing office of the Stoneview Lofts, a converted warehouse in the North Loop, ironically just 6 blocks from my father's new residences project. The unit I wanted was on the top floor. It was all exposed brick and massive, industrial windows that faced south, flooding the space with a brilliant, uncompromising light. It had an open-concept living area large enough for my desk, 2 work tables, and a wall of whiteboards. "It's a 12-month lease," the agent said, looking at my application, then at me, trying to square my teacher's salary with the rent. "That's fine," I said. I handed her the check for the deposit and first and last month's rent. "I'll take it. I can move in tomorrow." I walked out into the bright afternoon, my keys in my hand. For the first time, I was paying for a space that was entirely, unapologetically mine. When I got back to my old apartment, the one that now felt like a temporary holding cell, I sent a single email to my mother. It was brief, surgical. "I need time. Do not contact me." I blocked her number, Cole's number, and my father's number. I blocked his assistant's number. I cleared my phone of the entire Whitaker infrastructure. The silence lasted 2 hours. Then my email chimed. It was Cole, using his corporate account, which I hadn't yet blocked. The subject line was, "Urgent, speech." I ignored it. 30 minutes later, my phone buzzed. A no-caller ID number. I knew who it was. Cole, resourceful in his entitlement, was calling from a burner line or the office landline. I let it ring until it stopped. He immediately called back. I answered. "What the hell? Ainsley?" he barked. No hello. "You're screening my calls? Did you block Mom?" "I have nothing to say to you." "Cole." My voice was flat, devoid of the old resentment. It was just a fact. "Listen, I don't have time for whatever fit you're throwing. That was a bad night. Dad was an ass. We all get it. But I am in a major bind here. I need that Astoria speech. I need it by 5 p.m. No. It was the first time I had ever said it to him without an excuse, without a qualifier. Just, no. There was a stunned silence on his end. "No? What do you mean?" "No, I covered for you. I told Dad you were probably just embarrassed about your career path. I bought you time. Now I need the speech." "You didn't cover for me. Cole, you used me as a shield, just like you've always used me as an unpaid writer. The answer is no. I'm not writing your speeches. Not today. Not ever again." His voice changed. The false, hurried panic was gone, replaced by the familiar Whitaker chill, the one he inherited from our father. "You think you're being clever," he hissed. "You think this little rebellion is going to get you something. You're making a very, very big mistake. You'll regret this, Ainsley. You have no idea what you're messing with." "Goodbye, Cole." I hung up. I blocked the no-caller ID feature. I shut my laptop. I sat in the quiet of my apartment, and I did not feel fear. I did not feel regret. I felt the click of a lock falling into place. The next day, I had a scheduled meeting with Dr. Mira Halverson. Mira was my mentor at the Astoria Trust, the one who had encouraged me to apply for the grant that funded the first robotics kits. She was a former engineer from MIT who had cashed out and dedicated her life to philanthropy that actually worked. She was sharp, precise, and had zero patience for bullshit. We met at a coffee shop near the university. She had a copy of my latest submission, the Q1 impact report for the labs, sitting on the table. "Your data is clean," she said, skipping the pleasantries. She tapped a graph. 92% improvement in standardized test scores for your cohort is impressive. But this, she flipped the page. 13 scholarship placements. That's the number that matters. You're not just teaching them STEM, you're teaching them how to leave. That's the goal, I said. The board agrees, she looked up from the papers, her eyes piercing. We're officially committing. The 6-year funding grant is yours. The papers will be drawn up by the end of the week. I couldn't breathe. 6 years. It wasn't just a prize. It was a runway. It was stability. It was independence. But I need to be clear. Ainsley, she continued, leaning in. This will put a target on your back. People don't like effective models in the nonprofit space. It makes their lazy check writing look bad. And you're about to be very visible. She pointed to a line item in the draft agreement. This is the intellectual property clause I had our lawyers add. It explicitly states that the North Star Labs curriculum, methodology, and all associated materials are your sole property, not the school districts, not the trusts. You built it. You own it. Do you understand? I understand, I said, my voice thick. Good, Mira smiled. A rare, brilliant thing. The other finalists are running a soup kitchen and a legal aid clinic, both worthy, but you are the only one who has built a scalable, replicable engine for social mobility. So, I'll ask you, are you ready for this? I thought of the dinner, of Cole's threat, of my father's words. You have built nothing. I am, I said. I was packing boxes that evening when a friend from my teacher's college, who now worked at the local paper, sent me a text. Hey, is this you? Congrats. It was a link to the online edition. The headline read, 3 finalists named for Great Lakes Humanitarian Award. There it was, a short bio of each finalist, and a picture. They hadn't used the headshot I'd submitted. Instead, they'd used a photo they found on the school's press release page from months ago. It was a picture of the lab, of me in the background, out of focus, while a 14-year-old girl named Luna was in the foreground, holding a robotic arm she had just soldered. It was perfect. I copied the link. I thought about emailing it to my mother, with a subject line, I am not a failure. I thought about sending it to Cole, with a simple, you'll regret this. I closed the email draft. I did not send it. I let the silence do the work. I let the facts spread on their own. My rehearsal at the Riverside Convention Hall was 2 days before the gala. A very earnest event planner and a sound technician met me on the massive stage. The room was empty, a sea of dark, linen-covered tables. This is it, the planner said, pointing to a seating chart on a clipboard. We have your sponsors, Harbor and Pine, right here at table 1, front and center. They'll have the best view in the house. Excellent, I said, looking at the spot. 5 meters. Close enough to see the sweat on a speaker's brow. Close enough to hear a whisper. The planner showed me the finalists' video. It was 3 minutes long. It was professionally edited. But the content was raw. It was my kids. It was Luna, saying, I didn't know how to code. Now I'm building a prosthetic hand. It was graphs showing the progress. It was a mother, a Somali immigrant, crying as she said, My daughter says she will be an engineer because of Miss Ainsley. I believe her. I watched, my throat tight. This was the speech I'd been trying to make my whole life. It's beautiful, I whispered. Right? The planner beamed. Okay, Tech. Miss Mercer, you'll be on this mic. Do you need anything special for your remarks? A separate podium? Special lighting? The technician looked at me, his hand on the mixing board. No, I said. Nothing special. Just make sure the audio is clear. I want everyone to hear every word. That night, an email slipped past my filters and landed in my inbox. The sender was an unlisted, garbled address. The subject line was just 2 words, the birthday. I stared at it. I knew, with certainty, what it was. A recording, a transcript, a threat from Cole. or a twisted apology from someone else. It was designed to pull me back into the drama, to make me react. I selected the message. I did not open it. I hit delete. I opened the document file for my acceptance speech. It was short. I had been writing and rewriting it in my head since that night at the Brass Finch. I stood in the middle of my new, empty, light-filled apartment, and I read it aloud to the bare walls. I timed it. 2 minutes and 58 seconds. Not a single word was wasted. The air backstage at the Riverside Convention Hall was cold. It smelled of dust, old curtains, and the faint metallic tang of hot lighting equipment. Through a gap in the heavy velvet drape, I watched the gala unfold. It was a sea of black ties and sequins. Hundreds of Minneapolis's most powerful people gathered under crystal chandeliers. On the massive screens flanking the stage, the sponsor loop played on repeat. The logos swirled in a crisp, digital dance, a bank, a law firm, and then, inevitably, the Harbor and Pine Holdings insignia, rendered in a self-important shade of diamond blue. It was the most prominent logo, the one that lingered for an extra second. My father had paid for this room. I looked past the lights, to the front of that room, table 1, the VIP spot, dead center, 5 meters from the stage. He was there. Graham Whitaker, in his element. He was leaning back in his chair, laughing, a glass of dark liquor in one hand. He was the king, surveying his court. Beside him, my brother Cole was illuminated by the glow of his phone, his thumb flicking in that impatient, constant scroll. He hadn't looked up. He was bored, waiting for the real event, the networking to begin. They were exactly as I had left them. I felt a presence beside me, a stagehand with a headset. "You're Ainsley? You're on after this first one. Just stay in the blue light." I nodded. My mouth was dry, but my hands were still. On stage, the MC, a local news anchor with a blindingly white smile, was introducing the category. And now, the award that is the heart of this evening, the Great Lakes Humanitarian Award. The room responded with a wave of polite, obligatory applause, the sound of 500 wealthy people acknowledging charity. The MC introduced the first finalist, a kind-looking woman who ran a downtown legal aid clinic. She spoke for her allotted 3 minutes, her voice trembling slightly. I watched my father. He fixed his face into an expression of benevolent interest. 2 minutes in, he checked his watch. By minute 3, as the woman was thanking her volunteers, he covered his mouth for a quick, barely consumed yawn. Cole was still typing. "Thank you, Sandra," the MC chirped. The polite applause returned. "Our next finalist," the MC read, her voice shifting into a higher gear, "is a true innovator. In a city of immense resources, it is easy to overlook the talent hiding in plain sight. This next initiative didn't just fill a gap. It built an engine, a STEM education model that, in less than 2 years, has directly impacted the lives of 118 students." My breath hitched. 118. I watched table 1. The number, my number, meant nothing to them. Cole did not look up. "The results are, frankly, astonishing," the MC continued. "Please, take a look." The lights in the hall dimmed. The music swelled, clean, bright, and hopeful. And then the video filled the massive screens. It wasn't a corporate video. It was my kids. It was the lab. With its mismatched chairs and overflowing circuit boards, it was a rapid-fire montage. A robot arm successfully grabbing a block, a line of code executing perfectly, a graph showing a 92% improvement in core competencies. And then, Luna, her face, serious and bright, filled the 20-foot screens on either side of the stage, towering over the room. Her voice, amplified by the state-of-the-art sound system, was clear and pure. "I didn't know how to code. I thought that was for other kids, you know, at the rich schools. But Miss Ainsley," she put the soldering iron in my hand and she said, "You can do this. You already have everything you need." The video faded to black. For a split second, the room was in total darkness. Then, White text appeared on the black screen. Founder and Executive Director, Ainsley Mercer. I didn't look at the screen. I looked at Table 1. It happened in an instant, but I will remember it in slow motion for the rest of my life. My father's head snapped toward the screen. His glass, halfway to his mouth, stopped. His confident smile did not fade. It froze, a grotesque mask of shock. His eyes widened, uncomprehending. Cole's head jerked up from his phone as if he'd been struck by lightning. His face, illuminated by the dying glow of the screen, was a mask of stark, bone-white panic. His mouth opened, a small, soundless "oh." Around them, the room reacted. A man at my father's table, Vance, the contractor from the birthday dinner, leaned in and whispered something. Other people, bankers and developers who knew Graham's daughter, were turning. They weren't looking at the stage. They were looking at Table 1, their expressions a delicious, awful mix of confusion and dawning realization. The polite murmur of the gala had died. The air was thick with sudden, focused silence. The MC's voice boomed into the void, bright and oblivious. And the founder of North Star Labs, please welcome Ainsley Mercer. The follow spot, a circle of brilliant, blinding white light, swung from the stage and found me in the darkness of the wings. At the same moment, at a table near the front, Dr. Mira Halverson stood up. She began to clap, not politely, but with sharp, genuine enthusiasm. Her table stood with her, then another and another. A wave of sound started, not from obligation, but from real emotion. The entire room of 500 people was getting to its feet, a standing ovation. I stepped out of the shadow and into the light. The heat of the lamp was immediate, like a small sun. I walked toward the podium at center stage. My heels made a solid, definitive click, click, click on the polished floor. I kept my shoulders straight. I kept my chin up. My eyes were not on my father, who was still standing, paralyzed, by his chair. My eyes were on the room. I was calm. I was precise. I reached the microphone. I waited for the applause to die down. The silence that fell this time was different. It was electric. Every person in that room was leaning forward. This was no longer a boring charity dinner. This was theater. I leaned in. My voice, amplified, filled the hall. It did not shake. Talent is everywhere, I said. Opportunity is not. I let the words hang in the air. We are told a convenient lie, that genius is rare, that brilliance belongs to a select few. It is a lie that allows us to be comfortable with inequity. It allows to look at a child in a struggling neighborhood and assume their potential is less than a child from a wealthy one. North Star Labs was founded on a simple, radical premise. The only thing separating those children is access. A murmur went through the crowd. This was not the speech they were expecting. I am honored to be here, I continued. On behalf of the 118 students who are the true innovators, on behalf of the parents who trust us with their children's futures, on behalf of the 13 students who earned scholarships to university programs this summer, I looked directly at Mira, who was beaming. And I am deeply grateful to the Astoria Trust. They didn't just write a check. They read the data. They met the students. They saw the work, and they believed in it. I scanned the room, my gaze passing over Table 1 as if it were any other table. I did not stop. I did not acknowledge them. I did not thank my family. I did not thank the diamond sponsor who had, just 2 weeks prior, called me his greatest failure. I took a small breath. This was the final part. The part I had rehearsed in my empty apartment. For a long time, I allowed my work to be measured by people who only value profit. But my students taught me that true impact is not measured in dollars or in buildings. It is measured in potential, unleashed. I looked straight ahead, into the dark, past the lights, at the hundreds of faces watching me. My value was never up for negotiation, and it never, ever required approval. I stepped back from the microphone. The lights went down. The applause hit me like a physical force. It wasn't the polite patter from before. It was a roar, a wave of genuine, thunderous sound that rose from all corners of the room. The standing ovation was real this time. I didn't smile. I didn't curtsy. I simply gave a small, respectful nod to the audience, turned, and walked off the stage, away from the side where my family was seated. Mira had told me to meet her by the stage left exit, where the trust members were gathering. The moment my feet hit the carpeted floor of the backstage area, I was no longer a finalist. I was a resource. Miss Mercer? Miss Mercer, a moment? A man I recognized from the city council grabbed my hand, his other hand clasping my shoulder. Phenomenal. Truly. My office needs to know more about this. We're working on the new city budget, and I want to know how we can support you. Thank you. Councilman, I said, my voice steady. Here is my card. I pulled one from the simple, clean box I had in my clutch. It just had my name, North Star Labs, and an email address. Before he could even pocket it, a woman in a severe black suit, who I knew ran the largest private scholarship fund in the state, was next. Ainsley, that was a masterclass. Those scholarship numbers, are they real? They are, I said. I want to see the data. My fund needs to invest in outcomes like yours. My assistant will call you, 9 a.m., tomorrow. Be ready to talk numbers. I'm always ready to talk numbers, I said. A line was forming. It was a receiving line, but for power, not for pleasantries. CEOs of local tech companies, deans from 2 different universities, the head of the teachers' union, all of them, who just an hour before would have walked past me as if I were a coat check girl, were now waiting to shake my hand. They didn't see Graham's daughter. They saw a solution. They saw a safe, innovative, and now very public-facing place to put their money. Then, a man pushed his way to the front of the line, his face flushed and sweating, his smile desperate. It was Vance Tierney, the contractor from the birthday dinner, the man who had laughed. Miss Mercer, he said, his voice too loud. He grabbed my hand with both of his palms still damp. That was just incredible. I mean, what you're doing for those kids. Incredible. I looked at him. I said nothing. His smile faltered. The flush on his face deepened. Listen, I was at a dinner recently, at the Brass Finch, and I feel terrible. I didn't understand. I was an ass. There's no other word for it. Yes, I said. He flinched, but he was a businessman, and he was here to make a deal. My company, Tierney Construction, we do a lot of pro bono work. We have to, city requirement, but we always get stuck with, boring stuff. But this is real. Your lab. You need a bigger space, right? You find a space, an old warehouse, anything. I will personally oversee the build-out. For free. All of it. Top to bottom. Whatever you need. This was the first tangible offer. Not a handshake, but bricks and mortar. Thank you. Mr. Tierney, I will be in touch when I have a building permit. Vance, call me Vance, please. He backed away, relieved, as if he'd just received confession. Over his shoulder, I saw my mother, Lydia. She was trying to get to me, her face a mask of pale, frantic urgency. She was wearing a silver dress that shimmered as she tried to navigate the crowd. But she was out of her element. She was used to people parting for her. This crowd, my crowd, didn't know who she was. They saw her as an obstacle. Ainsley, your model is brilliant, a tech CEO was saying, blocking her path. Ainsley, could you speak at our convocation? The dean was asking, stepping right in front of her. My mother was completely, effectively boxed out, blocked by the very wall of congratulations I had built. She stopped trying, her hands clutching her small silver purse, and just watched me, her eyes wide, as if seeing a stranger. And then I felt a cold shadow. The crowd around me parted instinctively. My father. Graham Whitaker had left his table. He moved through the throng not by pushing, but by sheer force of presence. People just got out of his way. He was not smiling. His face was a thundercloud, his eyes chips of ice, He stopped directly in front of me, so close I could smell the expensive scotch on his breath. He spoke in a low, controlled growl that was more terrifying than any shout. "We need to talk, now." "I'm busy. Father," I said, my voice quiet, but not deferential. I looked past him to the woman from the scholarship fund. He took a step, blocking my view. "You will not walk away from me. Do you have any idea what you just did?" "I accepted an award," I said. "You embarrassed this family," he hissed. "You sat there, knowing. You let those screens run. You made me look like a fool. You made me, your sponsor, look like an idiot." The old me would have shrunk. The old me would have apologized. The old me would have dissolved in guilt. The new me looked him dead in the eye. "I did not mention you. I did not mention your company. I talked about my work, if you were embarrassed. That is a reflection of your actions, not mine." His fury was so potent it was almost visible. He was shaking, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. "I am your father." "And I am your daughter, the one you called a failure, the one you wished was never born." His face went white. He had not expected me to say the words. "We have nothing to talk about," I said. I made a move to step around him. He grabbed my arm. His fingers, strong and hot, clamped down on my bicep. I stopped. I did not pull away. I simply looked down at his hand on my arm. Then I looked back up at his face. I waited. The pressure from his fingers was immense, but I did not wince. After a long, terrible second, he seemed to realize where he was. In a room full of his peers, his partners, his competitors. He let go as if my arm had suddenly become white-hot. "This is not over," he whispered. "You're right," I said. "It's not, but the terms have changed. If you ever want to have a conversation with me again, you will do it on my terms. You will find every single person who was in that private dining room, and you will apologize to me, publicly, in front of all of them. Until then, we have nothing to say." I did not wait for his answer. I turned, leaving him standing there, and walked toward the exit, my line of supporters trailing behind me. I made it through the lobby, past the rotating logos of Harbor and Pine, and out into the cold night air. The valet, seeing me, ran for my car. The old Civic looked small and humble under the bright portico lights of the convention center. "Ainsley!" I turned. It was Cole, running, his tie askew, his face panicked. He was alone. He skidded to a stop in front of me. "Ains, Jesus Christ, what was that? You're a finalist? For the Astoria Award? Why didn't you tell anyone?" "Why would I?" said, taking the key from the valet. I don't know. I didn't know you were doing any of this. The kids, the labs, I thought it was just some weekend hobby." "Because you never asked," I said. The words hit him. He actually recoiled. He opened his mouth, then closed it. He looked, for the first time in his life, completely lost. He had no speech, no script. "I don't," he stammered. "Goodbye, Cole." I got into my car. I started the engine. I drove away from the valet, from my brother, from the gala, from the entire towering, gilded cage of my family's expectations. I drove through the empty downtown streets. I was not crying. I was not triumphant. I was just light. It felt as though I had been carrying a 100-pound backpack for 31 years, and I had just, finally, set it down. I slept for 10 hours, a deep, dreamless sleep in my new, bright apartment. The next morning, I made coffee and went online to check the news. It was the front page of the digital paper, the main story, above the fold. The headline was simple: Great Lakes Humanitarian Award goes to local teacher Ainsley Mercer. The lead photo was of me on stage, in the navy dress I had bought for my own humiliation, now a symbol of my independence. But it was the photo below it that made me stop. A smaller, inset picture, taken from the side of the hall. It was a perfectly timed, candid shot. It was table 1, at the exact moment my name had appeared on the screen. It showed my father, frozen, his glass halfway to his mouth, his face a perfect picture of stunned horror. Beside him, Cole was staring forward, his own face white, his mouth open. They looked like wax figures, their arrogance and confidence completely shattered. The caption was brutal in its simplicity. Harbor and Pine CEO Graham Whitaker, left, and VP Cole Whitaker, right, diamond sponsors of the event. Watch the announcement. My phone buzzed on the counter, and again, I looked at my laptop, the email inbox, which usually held 2 or 3 messages from the school district, was exploding. I opened it. 36 new messages, partnership offers from tech firms, inquiries from 3 different school districts, 9 invitations to speak at conferences, 2 emails from universities, 1 in Chicago and 1 in Boston, asking if the North Star Labs model was available for replication. And then, a call from Mira. "Get your walking shoes on. Ainsley," she said, her voice crackling with energy. "I just got off a call with the full board. They were impressed. They're increasing the first-year funding, immediately, enough to open 2 new satellite sites by the end of the year. Go find me 2 more buildings. Vance Tierney just called me. By the way, he's all yours." I hung up, my head spinning. Later that day, the award itself was delivered by a courier. It was heavy, a clean, modern sculpture of glass and brushed steel. I walked to the wall in my new living room, the one I had designated as the workspace. I hammered a single, strong nail into the exposed brick. I hung the award. It wasn't a trophy. It wasn't for show. It was a reminder. It was an anchor. It was the foundation for the work that was just beginning. It was a promise to those kids, and to myself, that I would not, ever again, be silent. The gala was on a Thursday. The real storm broke on Monday. It didn't start in the society pages, which I had expected, but in the Business Journal, a local financial columnist, known for her sharp and cynical takes on the Minneapolis elite, ran a piece that wasn't about the gala, but about the business of the gala. The headline was, "When Philanthropy Goes Off Script, Harbor and Pine's Blind Spot." The article was brutal in its precision. "The most expensive diamond-level sponsorship of the evening," she wrote, "was purchased by Harbor and Pine Holdings. The keynote speaker was its CEO, Graham Whitaker. The irony, lost on no one, was that the night's grand prize winner for humanitarian innovation was his own daughter, Ainsley Mercer, an innovator he apparently failed to recognize in his own backyard. It begs the question, what else, in his own multi-million-dollar portfolio, is the CEO of Harbor and Pine failing to see? That single paragraph was a pebble that started an avalanche. By Tuesday afternoon, Mira forwarded me a link to a press release from Ridge North Capital, a major investment partner in my father's new hotel project. The release was dry, corporate speak, but the message was clear. They were indefinitely postponing their involvement in the $7.8 million deal, pending a reevaluation of partner alignment on leadership and culture. Leadership and culture, Mira had typed in her email. That's the new killshot phrase. It's cleaner than breach of contract. It's an ethics-based pullout. The next day, an internal Harbor and Pine email was leaked to the same financial reporter. It was from the H&P Board of Directors, addressed to my father. It strongly recommended an immediate third-party review of corporate culture, with a special focus on executive-level conduct and internal psychological safety. The blood was in the water. Then, the personal consequences began to land. Cole, who was scheduled to be a keynote speaker at the Midwest Real Estate Summit, a career-making gig he had been bragging about for 6 months, was quietly removed from the speaker list. He was replaced by a rival from a smaller firm. His face, his name, was now a liability. My family's silence, which I had enforced with my phone blocks, was total, but I knew the pressure was building. On Friday, a week after the gala, a package arrived at my new apartment. The doorman, who I'd given a strict no visitors, no exceptions rule, brought it up. It was a simple, thick, cream-colored envelope addressed to Ainsley Mercer in my mother's flawless, cursive hand. I opened it. It was a handwritten letter, on her personal stationery. Ainsley, it began. I have no words to describe the shame I feel. Not for what happened, but for my part in it. For all the years I chose silence. For the dinner. For your birthday. I was a coward. I have always been a coward. I see that now. I don't ask you to forgive me. I don't deserve it. I needed you to know that I saw you on that stage, and I was proud, and I was so ashamed. Love. Mom. I read the letter twice. It was the most honest thing she had ever written to me. The old me would have cried, would have called her, and the old, toxic pattern of apologies and reconciliations would have reset the board. I put the letter down. I thought for a long time. Then I went to my desk and pulled out a simple note card. Mom, I wrote, I don't need your words. I need your actions. My lab is open to visitors on Wednesday at 4 p.m. Come and see the work. I sent it. I did not know if she would show up. The following Wednesday, at 3:59 p.m., Lydia Whitaker walked into the high school gymnasium, wearing a cashmere coat that was worth more than the school's entire computer lab budget. She looked terrified. I didn't greet her. I didn't stop the class. I was in the middle of a diagnostic with the robotics team. The problem isn't the code, I was saying to Luna. It's the gear ratio. Check your torque. My mother stood in the back, by the bleachers. She watched for an hour. She watched 14-year-olds debug Python code. She watched 2 boys from the Somali neighborhood and a girl who lived in the nearby housing project argue passionately and intelligently about sensor placement. She watched them present their solution for the maze, and she watched the robot successfully navigate it on the 3rd try. She watched the entire class erupt in cheers. When the bell rang and the kids started packing up, I walked over to her. Her face was pale, and her eyes were red. She had been crying, silently, for most of the hour. They are brilliant, she whispered. I know, I said. I've been trying to tell you. She looked at me, her gaze full of a new, painful understanding. What can I do? These kids are brilliant at robotics, I said. But their math scores are low. They're behind on fundamentals. I'm one person. I can't teach robotics and remedial algebra at the same time. She nodded, wiping her eyes. I was a math major, at Vassar, before I met your father. I know, I said. She returned the next week, and the week after that. She came every Thursday, without fail. She sat at a corner table with 3 of the freshmen, and with infinite, quiet patience. She taught them fractions, and variables, and quadratic equations. The kids started calling her Mrs. L, the quiet grandma who was a killer at math. It was a start. Cole's apology, when it came, was not on cream stationery. It was a long, rambling email sent to my new North Star Labs account, which he must have had to look up. It was a masterpiece of self-pity and reluctant confession. Ains, it began. This whole thing is a nightmare. You've really screwed Dad. But I guess, I get it. I've been thinking about what you said. Because you never asked. You're right. I never did. I saw you as the kid sister. The one who was good at, words. I just called when I needed something. And I was an ass when I didn't. I don't know how to fix it. Dad is losing his mind. He's looking for someone to blame. Be careful. I read it, and I felt nothing. No anger, no sympathy. He was right. He was an ass. But his admission changed nothing. I typed a 1-line reply. Words are cheap. Cole, actions are expensive. I hit send. The consequences at Harbor and Pine continued to mount. The board of directors, now in full panic mode, did more than just request a review. They mandated it. A memo, which was also leaked, announced a series of mandatory, all-day, ethical leadership and psychological safety workshops for all senior-level staff, including Graham Whitaker. My father, forced to sit in a hotel conference room and listen to a consultant talk about vulnerability and safe spaces. The humiliation for him would be worse than any financial loss. Then, the final piece fell. Mira called me, her voice urgent. Ainsley, I'm giving you a heads up. I just got a call from a reporter at the Financial Times, the national desk, not the local paper. Someone sent them a file. My blood went cold. What file? An audio file, anonymously, from that night, your birthday. I sat down. The birthday. The email I had deleted. Someone else had a copy. It's a hot mic recording. Ainsley, Mira said, her voice low. The reporter says the quality is crystal clear, as if a microphone on the table was live and recording. He says you can hear everything, the clinking of glasses, the laughter, and then the speech. He's in the process of getting it voice verified, but he says he's 99% sure the voice on the recording saying those things is Graham Whitaker. I closed my eyes. Cole. It had to be Cole, in his panic. Or maybe someone else. Vance? The silent wife at the table? It didn't matter. He's running an investigative piece, Mira said. This is moving beyond a local business spat. This is about to become a national story about corporate ethics and toxic leadership. It's going to be a firestorm. I need to know, right now, that this didn't come from you. It didn't, I said, my voice a whisper. I didn't leak anything. Mira, I'm just building my labs. I know, she said, and I could hear the smile in her voice. I believed you, but you need to be prepared. This is the endgame, Ainsley. Your father has two choices. He can either get in front of this, give the most public, humiliating apology of his life, or he can try to counterattack. And a man like Graham Whitaker, he doesn't know how to apologize. The question hung in the air, a silent, ticking bomb. The reporter was verifying the audio. The clock was running. My father's entire empire was balanced on the edge of a knife, and it all depended on his answer to a single question. Would he say he was sorry, or would he try to burn me to the ground? My father did not know how to apologize. He only knew how to acquire. His counterattack came, not as a public statement, but as a private email. It bypassed my public access North Star Labs account and landed in the old personal email address he hadn't used in years. He was trying to remind me that I was, in some way, still his. The subject line was, "A sensible path forward." It wasn't a letter, it was a proposal. It was bullet points. 1. Harbor and Pine Holdings, through its philanthropic arm, will commit to a 5-year, renewable grant for North Star Labs, effective immediately. 2. The funding amount will be $500,000 per annum, with a 10% increase each year pending a simple review. 3. This grant will be announced publicly as the Whitaker Family Education Initiative. 4. The new North Star Labs flagship center will be officially named the Graham Whitaker Center for STEM Innovation. I read the bullet points. It wasn't an apology. It was an invoice. He was trying to buy my silence. He was trying to purchase my lab, my name, and my story, and rebrand it as his own. $500,000. He thought my principles, my work, my value, had a price tag. He had learned nothing. I hit reply. My response was not in bullet points. No, the terms remain unchanged. A public apology, in person, to me, in front of the people who were at that dinner. I hit send. He did not reply, but his machine did. 2 days later, the Harbor and Pine PR department, which had been in a state of terrified silence, roared to life. It was a full-scale media blitz. They launched a new campaign. Harbor and Pine, our family, your community. Suddenly, my father's face was everywhere. Not the cold, shocked face from the gala photo, but a new, professionally shot portrait. Him, smiling warmly, wearing a cable-knit sweater, not a suit. There were paid editorials in the local paper about his lifelong, quiet commitment to family values. There were glossy, targeted ads on social media featuring pictures of him and Cole, pictures from at least 5 years ago, supposedly reviewing blueprints for a new community park. They were trying to bury the gala story under a mountain of expensive, unwholesome bullshit. It didn't work. On Thursday, exactly 1 week after Mira's warning, The Financial Times dropped its investigative piece, The National Desk. The audio was the centerpiece. They had embedded a 1-minute clip in the article, and it was horrifying. It was worse than I remembered. The sound quality was perfect. You could hear the ice in the glasses. You could hear Vance Tierney's sycophantic laugh. And then you could hear my father's voice, smooth, calm, and utterly detached, as he said it. "You are, in every measurable way, a failure." And then, the final, chilling line, delivered with the cadence of a toast. "I wish you'd never been born." The internet exploded. The story wasn't just about a cruel father anymore, it was about a CEO. The audio became a symbol of every toxic boss, every abusive leader, every boardroom bully who had ever held power. Mr. Delaney, Harbor, and shame started trending. Mr. Delaney failure. Mr. Delaney. Wish you'd never born. The backlash was immediate and catastrophic. The local church, the one with the Whitaker name on the main stained glass window, released a statement. "We are a community of compassion. Recent revelations. Deeply troubling. Our prayers are with all parties." It was a public excommunication. The local university, where my father had been a trustee, announced an emergency review of his board seat. Cole sent me a text from a new, unknown number. "He's collapsing. You have to call this off. He's not eating. He's just sitting in his office. You're destroying him. You're destroying the family." I looked at the message. You're destroying him. The classic reframing. The abuser as the victim. The person setting a boundary as the aggressor. I typed a reply. "I am not doing anything to him. He is experiencing the consequences of his own actions. Do not contact me again." I blocked the number. Through all this, the work continued. The work was the only thing that was real. My mother, to her credit, understood this. She never mentioned the article. She never mentioned the audio. She just showed up. Every Thursday, 4 p.m., she sat at the back table of the lab, her silver hair bent over a workbook. The kids trusted her now. They knew Mrs. L was the one to ask when your math wasn't working. She was, in her own quiet way, atoning. She was doing the work. And my own work was accelerating. The gala, and the subsequent media storm, had turned a spotlight on North Star Labs, and where the spotlight shined, opportunities bloomed. I received an official invitation to speak at TEDx Twin Cities. The theme, Impact Without Approval. A week after that, I was in a meeting with a woman who ran a private technology fund, the Lumen Fund. She was like Mira. No nonsense. All data. She had read my impact reports, my 6-year plan, and the articles. "I'm not interested in sponsoring a gala," she said, looking at me over her glasses. "I'm interested in building independent institutions. You've been offered bribes, I assume." $500,000 a year, plus naming rights, I said. She laughed. "He's cheap. I'll do better. $1.2 million, not as a grant, as an endowment, placed in a trust, managed by a third party. The interest alone will give you a permanent operating budget, but it comes with a condition." "What's the condition?" "You keep it independent, no corporate naming rights, ever. You don't sell your curriculum, you don't sell your name, you stay you. Can you do that?" "Yes," I said, my voice thick. "That's all I've ever wanted to do." We shook hands. The next month, I signed the lease on the third North Star Labs site. It was in the Camden Works building, a beautiful old warehouse with river views. It was the space Vance Tierney had promised. True to his word, his crews had descended on it. They had turned the cavernous, dusty shell into a state-of-the-art facility. New wiring, perfect lighting, custom-built workbenches, and a gigabit internet line. He had spent, by my calculation, at least $200,000 of his own money. He had not asked for a single press release. We held a small open house for the new Camden site, just for the parents and students of that neighborhood. I was hanging up a whiteboard when I saw him. "Cole?" He was standing in the back of the room, near the door, wearing jeans and a baseball cap, as if he were in disguise. He wasn't on his phone. He was just watching. He watched the kids run in, their eyes wide with excitement. He watched me greet the parents. He watched my mother, Mrs. L., who had come over to help set up, calmly explain a circuit board to a new parent. He looked thin. He looked tired. He did not look like a vice president. He just looked like a man watching a world he didn't understand. I didn't approach him. I didn't acknowledge him. I let him watch. After about 20 minutes, he turned and slipped out the door as quietly as he had come in. That evening, I got back to my apartment. There was another envelope. This one was cheap, white, a standard business envelope, no return address. It had been slipped under my door. Inside, there was no letter. It was a newspaper clipping, the photo from the birthday dinner, the one of my father, Cole, and me at the table, right before the speech, the one the paper had run in their initial "Local Girl Makes Good" story, before the gala. Scrawled across the bottom of the photo, in shaky block letters, was a single sentence. "I am sorry I laughed." I didn't know who it was from. Vance, maybe, or one of the other partners, or their silent spouses. It didn't matter. It was proof, a crack in the foundation. I didn't throw it away. I kept it, placing it in the back of my desk drawer, a piece of evidence, a receipt for a single, small, hard-won change in the world. I was on the phone with Mira that night, planning the official, large-scale launch for the Camden Center. "This is it, Ainsley," she said, her voice serious. "The endowment is secure. The new site is built. The press is on your side. You've won. You've brought an entire empire to its knees." "It doesn't feel like winning, Mira," I said honestly, looking out my window at the city lights. "It just feels quiet." "Good," she said. "That's how you know it's real. Now listen to me. Don't let that gala be the peak of your story. Don't let the media make this about the fall of Graham Whitaker. That's his story. Your story is about what you build. The gala was just the prologue, the grand opening of the North Star Center. That's your ending. That's the part you control. So let's make it count." Mira was right. The gala was the prologue. This was the story. We announced the grand opening of the North Star Innovation Center. The name felt solid, permanent. It was no longer a lab in a basement. It was a center, a real, physical institution, housed in the soaring, light-filled Camden Works warehouse that Vance Tierney's crews had transformed from a ruin into a cathedral of learning. The press release was simple, factual, and focused entirely on the students, but the guest list told the other story. The mayor was confirmed to speak, the university chancellor, the superintendent of schools, the principals from the 5 schools we were now partnered with, hundreds of parents and, of course, the media, not just the local education beat, but the national business desks that had been tracking the Harbor and Pine story. At the bottom of the invitation, and on the landing page for the event, the sponsors were listed in a clean, bold font. Lead funding provided by the Astoria Trust and the Lumen Fund. My father's name, his company's logo, was nowhere. Its absence was a statement more powerful than any headline. The public invitations went live at 9 a.m. on Monday. At 9:15, the email I was expecting landed in my inbox. It was from him, from his personal account. It was short, stripped of all corporate speak. He was done negotiating. He was issuing a final command. "Ainsley, I see you are holding your event on Saturday. I will be there. I expect to be given 5 minutes on the podium to address the attendees and congratulate you on your work." I stared at the words. I expect, not. May I? Not. I would like to. After everything, the public humiliation, the leaked audio, the collapse of his stock price, the loss of his partner, he still believed he had the right to expect. He still believed he could fix this by force. He wanted to stand on my stage, beside me, and force a photo op of family unity, a visual lie to undo the audio truth. My fingers were ice cold on the keys. My reply was just as short. "That is not possible. My terms have not changed. You are welcome to attend as a member of the public. If you wish to speak, you must first apologize, publicly, to the people who were at that dinner." I hit send. This time, there was no counteroffer, no proposal, no new PR campaign, just a heavy, terrifying silence. The countdown had begun. The silence was broken 2 days later by a text from a number I didn't recognize. "It's Cole. Please, I need to see you. 10 minutes. Not at the office, not at your place. Please, Ains, before the event." I was suspicious, but for the first time, I heard a word I had never heard from him. Please. We met at a small, loud coffee shop in a neighborhood neither of us belonged to. A neutral, anonymous place that smelled of burnt coffee and cleaning solution. He was already there, sitting in a back booth, hunched over a cup. He looked terrible. He had lost weight. His expensive suit was rumpled, and the confident, arrogant sheen of the Whitaker air was gone. He just looked tired. I sat down. I did not order anything. "What do you want, Cole?" He didn't look at me. He stared at the dark liquid in his cup. "I need to tell you something, before Saturday, because I don't know what he's gonna do." He took a shaky breath. "It was me, Ainsley. I'm the one who sent the audio to the Financial Times." I froze. I had assumed it was Vance. I had assumed it was another guest, a silent partner, a waiter, anyone. I had never, not once, suspected him. "Why?" My voice was flat. "Because I was tired," he whispered. He finally looked up, and his eyes were red-rimmed and raw. "I was just so tired. Of him. Of covering for him. My whole life. I've been his shield, cleaning up his messes, managing his temper, apologizing to partners, lying to Mom, lying to myself. That night at the Brass Finch. I looked at his face when he said those things to you, and he enjoyed it. He liked the power." He shook his head, a small, spasming motion. "And then you just left. You didn't cry. You didn't scream. You just put your glass down and walked out. And I was jealous, and I hated myself for it. And I knew I was becoming him." "So you leaked the audio," I said, stating the fact. "He was going to fire a vice president for the stock dip," Cole said, his voice cracking. "A woman with 2 kids. He was going to blame her for the Ridge North deal falling through. And I just snapped. I couldn't cover for the wrong anymore. I couldn't be him. So I sent it. I sent it to the one reporter he couldn't buy. I had to blow it all up. I had to stop him. He had done a monstrous, destructive, selfish thing, and he had done it, perhaps, for the first, truly moral reason of his life." I sat in the silence, the hiss of the steam wand and the clatter of plates filling the space between us. I took a long, slow breath. "Thank you," I said. He looked up, stunned, his mouth open. "What?" "For finally doing one right thing, even if it was for the wrong reasons." "Ains," he started, his voice thick. Is it all over? The family? The company? Is there any chance for us?" I stood up, pulling my jacket tight. The door opens when boundaries are respected. "Cole, not before. You just told the truth. That's a start. Now you have to live with the consequences." I left him in the booth. As I walked out, my phone buzzed. It was an email from my mother. She wasn't asking for forgiveness anymore. She was working. She had taken charge of the parent volunteers for the grand opening. The email was a list of confirmations, a schedule for the reception table, and a note. Ainsley. I spoke with Luna's mother. She was nervous about the media. I told her this was not about the cameras. This was about celebrating her daughter's genius. She is going to be the first one there. I am so proud of them. She had moved from guilt to responsibility. The old world, however, was still trying to claw its way in. An hour later, I received a glossy, professionally designed email from Harbor & Pine's public relations firm. "Dear Miss Mercer, on behalf of Harbor & Pine Holdings, we would be honored to sponsor the media and photography zone at your upcoming event. We believe strongly in..." They wanted to buy the one thing I would never sell, the visual. They wanted their logo on the banner behind the mayor, behind me, behind the kids. They wanted to co-opt the narrative at the last second. I forwarded it to the event manager Mira had hired. The reply was sent within 3 minutes. A polite, formal, and legally binding, "No, thank you. All sponsorships for this event are closed." The media pressure was building. The reporter who broke the audio story published his long-form follow-up. It was a profile, not of Graham, but of me. He had interviewed Mira, the Lumen Fund, Vance Tierney, who gave a quote about being humbled to be a part of the project, and my old principal. The piece was titled, "The Unstoppable Ainsley Mercer: How One Teacher Built an Engine for Change." The article highlighted my refusal of my father's money and the PR team's desperate attempt to sponsor the gala. A tech CEO in Seattle tweeted the article, and a new hashtag was born, Mr. Delaney, North Star Not for Sale. It went viral. It was the perfect, clean, David versus Goliath narrative. I was the mission. He was the money. He was cornered. He was out of options. He had tried to buy me. He had tried to command me. He had tried to go around me. So he made his final, most desperate move. A photo appeared on a local political gossip blog. It was a long lens shot, taken that morning. It was my father, looking haggard, in his dark suit, standing on the steps of City Hall. He was shaking hands with the mayor, the same mayor who was scheduled to give the opening remarks at my event. The caption underneath was pure acid. Image crisis management? Graham Whitaker seen in a closed-door meeting with the mayor, just days before his estranged daughter's triumphant grand opening, trying to angle for a spot on the podium. Graham? The bomb was set. The public was watching. My father had just implicated the mayor in his personal drama. He had put everyone on notice. He was coming. The clock was ticking. 48 hours. The night before the opening was a vortex of quiet, intense activity. The media storm was raging outside my walls. The Mr. Delaney, North Star Not for Sale hashtag was everywhere, and the picture of my father with the mayor had every political reporter in the city scrambling for a comment. But inside my apartment, I was focused on the end game. Mira arrived at 7 p.m., not with a bottle of champagne, but with a thick, leather-bound document. "This isn't a celebration, Ainsley," she said, laying it on my clean kitchen counter. "This is a weapon, and you just earned it." It was the endowment contract. 10 years. From the Lumen Fund, a guaranteed, untouchable, permanent budget that made North Star Labs fully autonomous. It was $1.2 million, locked in a trust, generating interest that would fund us forever. "Read the conditions," Mira said, pointing. I read them. They were not restrictions. They were armor. 1. The mission of North Star Labs shall not be altered, diluted, or otherwise compromised for any reason, financial or political. 2. The organization will maintain full financial transparency, with all audits made public. 3. The North Star Innovation Center, and any future sites, shall not be sold, licensed, or otherwise encumbered by corporate naming rights. I picked up the pen. My hand was shaking. It was a strange, unfamiliar tremor. It wasn't fear. I had been afraid for my entire life. Afraid of my father's disapproval. Afraid of his anger. Afraid of being a failure. I was not afraid anymore. I had faced all of those things, and I was still standing. No, this was something else. This was the vibration of a key turning in a lock that was so old, so rusted. I had forgotten it was there. It was the physical, seismic shift of my life leaving the Whitaker orbit, a trajectory I had been trapped in since birth. I was, with this signature, becoming my own center of gravity. I signed my name, Ainsley Mercer. "Good," Mira said, closing the binder with a solid thud. "Now, about tomorrow. He's coming." It wasn't a question. "I know," I said. "The mayor's office called me, frantic. They are not happy with your father. The mayor was blindsided. He thought it was a routine business meeting. Your father used him, and he knows it." "Will the mayor still be there?" "He wouldn't dare miss it now," Mira said with a grim smile. "You've made this the only stage in town. Every politician, every CEO, every journalist will be there. Which brings us to him. He will try something. Ainsley. He is a cornered animal. I know, I said. I'm putting 3 extra security guards at the podium, not for him, but for you, to keep him away from the mic unless you explicitly call him up. You have full control of that stage. Do not give it up unless it's on your terms. I nodded. My phone, which had been quiet all evening, buzzed on the counter. It was a text from a number I had unblocked. My mother. Ainsley, I will be there at 9 a.m. to help the parent volunteers. I am bringing coffee for everyone. Tomorrow, I will be standing next to you, not behind you. Love, Mom. I took a breath. She was done atoning. She was ready to act. The phone buzzed again, almost immediately. A different number. Cole. Dad knows about the security. He knows his name isn't on the list. He's furious. He told me to tell you he's coming, alone. He's not bringing PR. He's not bringing an assistant. He's just coming. Please, Ains, be ready. I don't know what he's going to do. I put the phone down. Alone. That was a new variable. A new and more dangerous one. Then, a new email chimed in my inbox. My new, secure North Star Labs inbox. The sender was an anonymous, encrypted address. The subject line was just a single word. Interference. I opened it. It was 2 sentences. We can provide a service. We can ensure the audio file from that night is scrubbed from every server, every news outlet, and every corner of the internet. A digital ghost. We can make it disappear. In exchange, Mr. Whitaker requires a guaranteed 3-minute speaking slot at your event. Unedited. My blood ran cold. This was not a back-alley deal. This was a professional threat. This was a sophisticated, high-level attempt at blackmail, at tampering. He had hired someone to silence the truth I had never even leaked. I did not reply. I did not delete it. I forwarded the entire message, headers and all, to the event manager, to Mira, and to the lawyer who had handled the endowment. I typed a single line. Please save this as evidence of attempted interference and blackmail. Should we need it? I closed my laptop. The chessboard was set. All the pieces were in motion. I sat in the middle of my living room, in the pool of light from the window. My original speech for the opening was on the table. I picked it up. It was a good speech. It was about my journey. It was about the birthday, the gala, the fight for independence. I crumpled it into a ball and threw it in the trash. That was my story. It was not their story. Tomorrow was not about me. It was not about him. It was about the kids. I took out a fresh legal pad. I started again. I wrote a new speech. I removed the personal. I removed the drama. I wrote about the community. I wrote about Luna's code. I wrote about the parents who trusted me. I wrote about the future. I wrote an invitation for every person in that crowd to stop being an audience and to become a partner. The speech was shorter. It was stronger. It was not about my value. It was about their value. I finished writing, my hand cramping. I felt a deep, profound sense of exhaustion, but also peace. I walked over to a box that I hadn't unpacked. I pulled out a framed photo. It was from the first year. In the storage room basement, before the grants, before the gala, before any of it, it was the first class. 12 kids, all of them looking awkward and slightly terrified, holding up their first, tiny, blinking LED circuits. 12 faces. I went to the door of my apartment, and I taped the picture to the inside of the door, right at eye level, where I would see it before I left. A reminder of the mission. My phone buzzed one last time. It was a video file, sent from a edu email address I didn't recognize. I tapped it. A young man's face filled the screen. He was sitting in a dorm room, a university pennant visible on the wall behind him. It took me a second, and then my heart stopped. It was Ben, one of the first 12, a kid who had been silent for a year, who had failed 9th grade math twice. Hey, Miss Mercer, he said, shifting nervously. My mom sent me the link to the new center. It looks crazy. I I'm here, at college. I'm a freshman in the engineering program, and I was just debugging my physics homework, and I remembered what you said. You said the problem is never the problem. The problem is just a set of bad assumptions. He gave a small, embarrassed laugh. I just wanted to say thank you. You changed my life. I know you're busy, but thank you. The video ended. I sat on the floor of my new, light-filled apartment, my back against the brick wall, and I put my head in my hands. And for the first time since that night at the Brass Finch, for the first time in this entire brutal, clarifying war, I cried. It was not a cry of sadness, or anger, or even relief. It was a cry of release. The tension I had been holding in my chest for a month, for a decade, finally broke. Ben's video. That was the real endowment. That was the real win. I wiped my face. I stood up. I looked at the picture of the 12 kids on my door. I looked at the new speech on my table. I took a deep breath. Tomorrow is not about him. I told myself, it is about the kids. Mira had given me one last piece of advice before she left. If he gets on that stage and apologizes, she'd said, let the community be the witness. If he gets on that stage and attacks you, let the community be the witness. Your only job is to stand in your truth. The community will do the rest. I walked to my bedroom. I set my alarm. 6:30 a.m. I was not going to be rushed. I was not going to be panicked. I was going to wake up, have my coffee, and I was going to start the day with the same calm, deliberate intention with which I was going to live the rest of my life. Outside my window, across the river, I could just see the edge of the Camden Works building. They had installed the sign late that afternoon. I squinted, and I could just make it out, lit up for the first time against the dark sky. North Star Innovation Center. It was on. It was real. The morning of the grand opening was bright, cold, and electric. The central courtyard of the North Star Innovation Center was packed, a dense, joyful crowd of hundreds. It was a perfect cross-section of the city. There were politicians in dark suits and parents in their Sunday best. There were tech CEOs standing next to school principals, and woven through them all, a flash of white, were the kids, my kids, all 118 of them, plus the new recruits from the 2 new sites, were wearing the t-shirts we had designed. They were simple white, with a drawing of a robot, sketched by Luna, on the front. I stood backstage, which was really just the main robotics lab, and looked through the glass-paneled garage door. I saw the mayor, looking uncomfortable, talking to Mira. I saw the reporters, a dozen of them, cameras at the ready, a mix of local news and national press. I saw my mother, Lydia, standing near the reception table, not as a guest, but as a volunteer, calmly handing out name tags to parents, her smile genuine and warm. And I saw the front row. It was reserved for speakers and honorees. There was a single empty seat, marked Graham Whitaker. He was not there, not yet. At 10 a.m. sharp, the mayor stepped to the podium. His speech was tight, political, and careful. He talked about public-private partnerships and Minneapolis's innovative spirit. He never mentioned Harbor and Pine. He did, however, use the phrase impact without approval twice, a clear public signal of whose side he was on. The crowd clapped politely. Then, Mira stepped up. She did not give a polite speech. She gave a call to arms. She talked about the 6-year journey. She talked about the data. She talked about the moral obligation to fund what works. She introduced the Lumen Fund, the crowd, sensing the real passion, gave her a thundering applause. And now, Mira said, her voice ringing with a pride that made my throat tighten. The woman who built this, the founder, the architect, and the heart of North Star Labs, my friend, Ainsley Mercer. I walked out. The applause was deafening. It was not for Graham's daughter, it was for me. I stepped up to the podium, which was set on a low, accessible stage. I looked out at the crowd, at the hundreds of faces, at the cameras, at my mother, who was watching me with her hands clasped to her chest. Thank you. Mira, I said, my voice clear and steady in the crisp air. Thank you. Mr. Mayor, thank you to the parents, the partners, and the principals who are here today. I looked at the speech I had written last night. The new speech. I am supposed to talk to you about the future, I said, but I am not the expert on the future. They are. I pointed to the front row of students. So, instead of my story, I want you to hear theirs. This was unscripted. The event manager looked panicked. I didn't care. I gestured to Luna, who was sitting in the front row, wearing her white t-shirt. Luna, come on up. Her eyes went wide. She looked terrified, then thrilled. She ran up the steps. Luna, I said, angling the mic down to her, tell them what you built last week. She said, her voice small, and then, as she saw the crowd, it firmed up. I built a moisture sensor for the community garden from a broken cell phone, so the plants don't die. It works. The crowd laughed, a warm, wonderful sound. Ben, I called out to a tall kid in the back, tell them what you're teaching the new kids. Ben, who had been a new kid just last year, came up. I'm teaching them Python, he said, trying to sound bored, but his eyes were shining. Because it's stupid that you have to be in a rich kid's school to learn it, and it's fun. The crowd didn't just clap this time, they cheered. For 5 minutes, I turned the stage over. I brought up a parent, a mother from the Somali community, who spoke, her voice thick with emotion, about how her daughter now corrected her math. She is a leader, the mother said. You made her a leader. The applause was rolling, genuine, and powerful. This was the work. This was the truth. I took the mic back, my heart so full I could barely speak. This is what we do here, I said. This is not a charity. This is an engine. This is an investment. We are here today to invite every person who has ever felt like they were on the outside, who was ever told their value was negotiable. We are inviting you to come in. This center is not mine. It is yours. I was about to make the final announcement, the one about the endowment, and then, as I was about to speak, I stopped. He had arrived. He was standing, not in the crowd, but on the edge of the stage, in the aisle. Graham Whitaker. He was alone, no Cole, no assistant. He was wearing a simple, dark overcoat. He looked pale, and old, and terribly human. The crowd, following my gaze, turned. A hush fell. The cameras, which had been focused on the kids, all turned, with a soft, mechanical whir, toward him. He was standing in the aisle, and I was on the stage, and we were, once again, in a public standoff. He did not walk to his reserved, empty seat. He walked, slowly, to the small set of stairs at the side of the stage. He stopped at the bottom. He looked at me. He did not gesture. He did not demand. He just waited. This was the moment, the test. I looked at Mira. She was holding her breath. I looked at my mother. Her hand was over her mouth. I gave a small, almost imperceptible nod to the security guard nearest the stairs. The guard, who had been tensing, relaxed. Graham Whitaker walked up the 3 steps. He came to the center of the stage. He stood next to me, but a few feet away. I did not move. I did not offer him the microphone. He looked at me, and I saw, for the first time, that his eyes were clear of the old, cold fury. They were just empty and tired. He gestured, a small, questioning motion, to the mic. I held it. I did not give it to him. He understood. He would speak from where he was. He turned to the crowd. His voice was hoarse, unamplified. He started. He cleared his throat. He leaned slightly toward my microphone. I did not pull it away. I did a terrible thing, he said, and his voice, amplified, echoed across the silent courtyard. The cameras were rolling. Every cell phone was up. In public, in a room full of people, I said something to my daughter that a father should never say, that a human being should never say. He paused, and the silence was total. You could hear a pin drop. He turned, not to the crowd, but to me. He looked me in the eye. "Ainsley," he said, "I am sorry. I was wrong. I was cruel. And I am so profoundly sorry. There are no conditions. There are no demands. That is all." He had done it. He had said the words. I looked at him. I did not cry. I did not hug him. I did not give him the absolution he was craving. This was not a reunion. It was a legal proceeding. The crowd was the jury. I held the microphone to my own mouth. "Are you willing to say that?" I asked, my voice cold and clear. "To the people who were at that dinner, and more importantly, are you willing to say it to the children who are here today?" He flinched. This was the real test. The apology to me was personal. This was the public atonement. He swallowed. He turned back to the crowd. He looked at the sea of white t-shirts, at the parents, at the mayor. "I was wrong," he said, his voice stronger now. "My whole life, I measured value by titles, by profit, by the size of the building. I was wrong. The value is in this." He gestured to the kids. "I was wrong." He had done it. I nodded. Once. I did not offer him a seat on the board. I did not announce a Whitaker family sponsorship. I did not invite him to speak about his company. I looked at this man, who had tried to buy my silence, who had tried to command my stage. "If you want to atone," I said, my voice quiet but carrying. "The work is hard. Our new algebra tutor, Mrs. L., needs help. We have a wait list. Be here, Monday morning, 9 a.m. You will be a math tutor." A gasp went through the crowd, the audacity of it. "No cameras," I continued, locking his gaze. "No press releases, no name tag on the door. Just you, and a workbook, and the kids who need the help. That is the offer. That is the only path back." The cameras, which had been focused on him, suddenly felt intrusive. A few of them were lowered, a few of the kids, not understanding the tension, but hearing the word tutor waved at him. He stood there for 3 long, agonizing seconds. He was a king being asked to be a peasant. He was a CEO being offered an internship. He was my father, being offered a chance. He looked at my mother in the crowd, who was watching him, her face a plea. He looked at Cole, who I now saw, standing in the very back, his face red, his eyes shining. Graham Whitaker looked back at me. "All right," he said. He turned, walked down the steps, and did not go to the front row. He walked, alone, to the very back of the crowd, and stood by a table, an invisible man. I took a deep breath. I turned back to the crowd. "Now for the real announcement," I said, and the joy flooded back into my voice. "Today, I am honored to announce that the Lumen Fund has provided a 10-year endowment for North Star Labs. This center and our work will be independent and permanent." The crowd erupted. "We are independent," I shouted over the cheers, "and with the support of the Astoria Trust, we will be opening 5 new sites across the state in the next 24 months. This was the climax. This was the victory. I gestured to the 3 students on stage. "And now, I would like to ask our founding members to do the honors." I handed the giant, comically large scissors to Luna. The mayor, forgotten, stood off to the side. Together, the 3 kids, my first students, cut the big red ribbon. Fauge, paper confetti, exploded from the roof. The music, a loud, joyful pop track, blasted over the speakers. The opening was official. It was done. As the crowd surged forward, as the kids ran into the new lab, I stepped back from the microphone. I let myself be swallowed by the community. Reporters shouted at me. "Ainsley, what does this mean for your family? Is this a reconciliation?" I just smiled, grabbed a white t-shirt from a box, and held it up. "Today is about the kids," I said to a reporter's camera. "The rest of it? That's just noise. The real answers are in the long-term work. Come back in a year. See what we've built." I walked away from the cameras. I walked into the new lab. The lights were on, bright, illuminating the new computers and the clean workbenches. I found an empty nail by the door. I took a small, laminated sign from my pocket, the one I had made last night. I hung it. Your value. No permission required. I looked through the glass window into the main hall. The party was in full swing. My mother was laughing, showing a parent the new 3D printer. Cole was in the back, talking, for the first time, to one of the students. And at a table in the corner, table 7, I saw him, Graham. He was sitting down. 2 kids, who had been too shy to go into the lab, were at the table. He had, with a shaking hand, picked up one of the sample workbooks from the table. He was pointing to a problem. The kids were leaning in. There were no cameras. There was no PR. I smiled. I turned away from the window, toward my new classroom. I took a deep, true, shuddering breath. The knot. The one I had carried in my chest for my entire life. The one that had been twisted by fear and failure and a desperate, aching need for approval was finally, on my own terms, undone. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I'd love to know where you are tuning in from. Please share your thoughts in the comments below. And do not forget to subscribe to Lila Revenge Stories. Like this video, and give it a little extra love by hitting the hype button. Your support helps these stories reach more people.